Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How I Fixed Your Data. My name is Jonas. I'm the co-founder of Koalify and also host of this show. And today I have Chris with me. Chris, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey there. My name is Chris Osantowski. I am based out of Chicago, but I work for an awesome HubSpot consulting partner named Pixis Growth Partners. And we've been working on HubSpot portals for over 10 years. We have a lot of experience in implementation, in training, in data. And yeah, we kind of found Koalify and have been using the tool across a lot of our clients. And yeah, really excited to talk about one specific instance today.
Nice, cool. And could you share a bit more about the agency? Do you have a specific focus on a certain industry?
Yeah, for sure. So, one thing that I love about our agency is we have broadened a lot. Today, actually, the client that I'm going to talk about is a home services company. We've worked with SaaS companies. I have a current client of mine that sells construction equipment, B2B. So we have a wide range of plans, and we've been delving, especially in the last couple of years, a lot more into custom integrations and kind of larger scale customizations and implementations for HubSpot, which again, like I said, Koalify has kind of been that like missing piece for us a lot, and given us that set of tools that has been missing to really clean up and help folks portals work the way that they want to.
Yeah, cool. Because you mentioned that you do onboarding implementations, but also data. Podcast is called How I Fix Your Data. So we're going to talk about data today. What kind of data challenges do you come across with your clients?
I mean, a lot of times when we start working with a client, they have a years old portal with just a mountain of data that they're kind of overwhelmed by and don't want to touch. That has been a lot of our experience. Another one of our experiences is, hey, if we have a new portal, that's great. There's no backlog of data, but we also have 8 different streams coming in, and we have no way to kind of cross-check and make sure that integrations work the way they should and things are deduplicating the way they should. I know, one thing that Jonas, you and I have talked about is, yeah, we have emails. If we don't have emails for our clients, if we're a heavy phone-based company, how are we going to deduplicate inside of HubSpot? So those have been like the big issues is lots of different streams, lots of different sources, or just a huge backlog that someone's former boss was going to manage and maybe get to, but just hasn't had the time. So yeah, those are the big 2 buckets that I kind of see us in.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds familiar. And that's what we see across a lot of our projects as well. A huge backlog where people never really thought about deduplication or data quality, and then it's a real mess, needs to be cleaned up. Or when you have an ongoing stream with a high volume of incoming records that are being updated, and to keep those clean and aligned, you very often need like a solution for deduplication and other data cleaning. Okay, cool. Let's zoom in on one challenge or one project that you recently did. Could you maybe describe the situation that you ran into?
Yeah, for sure. So, this is a client that we started off a implementation project with. They had just bought HubSpot, but this was a firm that owns a number of home services companies. They ended up not kind of rebranding all of them. They each owned their individual brand inside of HubSpot. Last we left off with this client, they had 20 brands inside of HubSpot, which is a lot,
Huge.
right? So many brands. And, with that come a lot of different challenges, right? We have 20 sets of stakeholders, 20 sets of processes for implementing and putting in the data. And so the main challenge with this was really just consolidation, right? We have, they had at the time they had 3 different phone plugins into HubSpot, which is great. You have incoming phone calls and you can't disrupt what everybody is doing. So they had 3 different like phone softwares. They had 2 different like UTM marketing tracking softwares for calls. They used CallRail and WhatConverts on top of those phone call systems. And then in addition to that, we had HubSpot forms. We also had some Gravity forms from a legacy site, all pushing data into HubSpot. That's not even
Okay.
to mention legacy customer data uploads, that they had that specific brands wanted to do. Just a absolute chaotic
Yeah.
influx of data into this system.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds indeed like a very complex use case. How did you approach it? Like you come in, you see all those different data sources, all those different integrations, the 20 plus brands. Like where do you start in such a project?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. Like, I think we started with the end goal in mind for this brand of saying, hey, with all of this, with all of these streams leading into this ocean, some of them have really awesome marketing information that we want to be able to capture. CallRail, for example, is a software that that we've found ourselves using a lot that will capture either UTM information, source information, and we wanted to ensure that hey, if we have three contacts with the same phone number, we want to find a way to get all of that great information that CallRail is capturing. And we
Mhm.
want that to be kind of what comes out on the other end and what, when the sales team goes to follow up, that they can reference. And when we report on, hey, how are all these leads converting? How are our ads doing? We needed to be able to tell that. And so that was kind of our like focus. If that was our North Star, then getting there was again just kind of shuffling everything into place and knowing that we had to prioritize the great marketing information that was being captured. That's kind of like perfectly set up for what we ended up building with Koalify. So yeah, that was kind of our thinking of knowing our end goal, and then yeah, just working backwards to find something that wasn't going to take hours a day from an admin to be plugging away at something.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great approach. You understood what was important was the data that was coming from CallRail, mainly, I assume, to get a rich profile of the merge record or the clean record afterwards. Yeah, curious to hear more about how you then actually set this up. So if you could share your
Yeah.
screen, we can take a look at the
Yeah.
actual setup.
So our main approach, obviously we used Qualify where we used a great mixture of, a fairly simple duplicate rule, a little bit more complex primary rules, and then finally we used a lot of merge rules.
Mhm.
So I am kind of just showing our demo portal right now, but with the duplicate rules, all that we had active was the just phone number basis. That was our only rule, and it's fairly simple. But the main thing that we wanted to do with this was kind of treat phone numbers like HubSpot treats emails. We shouldn't have multiple contacts with the same phone number, at least for this business model, right? So we kept this pretty streamlined, this pretty straightforward. And from there, where we really refined things and where we really kind of uh, made our process work was identifying very, very strong primary rules. So this custom rule is just kind of an example of what we set up. So we have a number of different fields that are imprinted by all of these different sources kind of plugging in. And we prioritized CallRail, right? Or we prioritized the contact and made the contact the primary that was coming from our sources with the most updated, the most important marketing information, right? When we capture the UTM, when we capture, hey, this was from a paid ad or this person was direct, right? Like that was the contact that we wanted to keep. This was also
Mhm.
key because this is where we decided to launch some of our downstream workflows off of. So if a contact came in from CallRail, we had rules set up to, hey, move the lifecycle stage to this, or create a lead here, or attach a deal here, whatever that looks like. We wanted to trigger off of the highest priority contact
Mhm.
That was coming in. And then obviously, kind of look for other rules down here so we could identify a primary. But that was the main piece. Then from there, we had a lot of merge rules that we worked on. So these were really vital, knowing that, hey, this contact could potentially have been created 3 times because they called in to a CallRail number. They flowed through a call software system that's also connected to HubSpot. And and then they received a text from another one and texted sales message back. And so ideally these integrations would have just found the same contact. They don't always work. They don't always work as intended. There's a +1 in front of the phone number. There are parentheses. There aren't parentheses. They are ideally set up to merge on the same one, but unfortunately they don't. And that's where these merge rules come in handy, is that we can prioritize, hey, if latest traffic source and additional lead source, that's where that vital marketing information is being captured. No matter what, prioritize those. Whoever or whichever contact is getting merged into whichever contact, prioritize these fields because these are ultimately the end goal. This is what we need to know, wherever that contact came from. So this was kind of our, if your house is burning down, these are the properties that are in the safe, right? They're going to be the ones going forward so that we can know and be sure about where that information is coming from. So yeah, I believe we had between 6 to 10 live in their system, because we were able to capture a lot of great information from these sources, and we just prioritized what was in there. And then we had a consolidated sort of lead source that triggered off of these, and we were able to build some logic in to say, hey, here's what the consolidated source was from all of these sources, and give some clear reporting kind of on the back end to be able to say where leads coming from, no matter where they're being created from, what sources are they actually coming from.
Yeah, nice. Interesting approach where the merge rules were one of the most important pieces for your implementations,
Yeah.
as these let you control the specific property values that you retain during a merge. So we're not going to necessarily retain the property value of the primary record, but you can specify here, like pick the record value that was last updated in case you're interested in the last traffic sources or UTM dimensions, or pick a specific value, like in this case, in your demo account, the email marketing value over any other values that you have. Nice. Clean approach. And if we jump back to the duplicate rules, so you mentioned that you focused on deduplication based on the phone number only. And one of the main reasons, feel free to open the rule. So one of the main reasons, this is a very straightforward rule. And one of the main reasons why HubSpot would create duplicates from those contacts that are coming from the different sources is because the formatting is probably not the same across the different sources.
Yeah.
And so if you would jump over to our fuzzy rules, we will see that we do close matches, not based on the exact phone number that's fully formatted the same, but on the last two, we'll neglect like the hyphens or brackets within your phone numbers, and we would also only look at the last 9 digits. So this allowed you to then easily find the duplicates phone numbers, even if they were formatted differently from the 3 different systems. Cool.
Absolutely.
And if we then maybe jump to outcomes or success for your client, like what were the results after you've implemented Koalify for your client?
Yeah, for sure. So we went down from around 700,000 contacts to just over 400,000 contacts. It was a stark night and day difference. And a lot of those, again, we would have potentially 4 or 5 contacts for people. And because we weren't able to deduplicate, because, hey, one software looks at a +1 for the US, +1 string of phone numbers, another has parentheses. Yeah, we would just have contacts created constantly. And bad contacts, a lot of times with any sort of marketing information, they would just have a phone call recorded on them, for example. And we were able to merge all of that. What ended up helping. And what ended up being able to happen, we were able to get clear reporting. We were able to match within a couple percentile points the marketing sources to the sales down the line, and have the ability to have a high level view of which of their marketing channels were working the best across 27 brands, with, again, like I said, 8 to 9 streams of data coming in, which that was, ultimately the end goal of the project, is having everything consolidated in there. And for us, being able to build an actual like singular consolidated source inside of HubSpot and to rely on that. One of the things that I've heard working in HubSpot is there are a lot of different places that source information can come and land, and it's difficult to overcome that challenge in theory when you have different software putting source information in different places, and you have 12 potential places that data could end up. Consolidating that is exceptionally difficult, especially when you add in the extra wrinkle of duplicate contacts.
Yeah.
And in knowing which to prioritize, Koalify made that possible, and kind of led to us being able to say with confidence, like, hey, here's what we have, and here are your best sources to kind of give that accuracy down funnel, so they know where to invest. It was an exciting project. I wish I was still in the portal. I wish I could show you some more of the actual reports, but it was amazing to wake up and see the like overall database shrink by that much in a good way, right? Like in a way that was controlled, in a way that we meant to do. It felt so good to just see a lot of those contacts with no first name or last name completely disappear. It was awesome.
Yeah, nice. That great results. And I can imagine indeed if you have the values of the sources spread across different properties and then also spread across different contacts because they're duplicated, that it's like attribution becomes a whole mess. But if you then have a controlled way of consolidating and merging these records into one, retaining specific property values, that you have a lot of control, and that you can specify the actual sources much better, and you can have reliable reporting at the end. Great results. And of course, I can imagine that the decrease also had a big impact on the license and number of marketing contacts from like 700 to, that was a nice side effect.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like the marketing contacts, but also the ability to ease up on your nurture workflows, ease up on the filters, right? We didn't have to have a like, okay, only from this source and only if they have this specific information can you enroll them to start to nurture them. It helped us have confidence in sort of, building that outreach, which is, again, another side effect of having a clean database is, you can actually trust your automation to not, spam someone with 3-4 different messages or set up tasks that, a salesperson never does because there's too many of them. I think that was a big piece. That was a big piece as well, that it just gave a lot more trust in the database.
And then do you have an idea on the actual reps that were calling or that were using these phone numbers, and then the people they were reaching out to? Because I can imagine that before you had probably multiple reps working on the same records, those contacts, prospects, or clients being called a couple of times by different reps without the full information. Were there any anecdotes or feedback from the team in that area?
Oh gosh, yeah, like it's tough. We didn't work as much directly with the sales team just because there were 27 of them.
Okay.
But I know that one of the teams that we did work a little bit more directly with, they had a more manual import process. I mentioned from talking to them, from doing trainings, they had to manually import some of their contacts from another system in, and had a lot of fear and kind of trepidation around like, is this going to work when I walked them through what Koalify would do in the back end and how it would merge for them. We got a lot of buy-in from their sales team, actually using tasks. That was another, like, it was one of the only sales teams we trained on this, but they actually were confident to use tasks, to set up workflows that would assign tasks out. Because for the vast majority of the teams, when there was this volume of contacts, the tasks, the calling, the following up was just too overwhelming. Yeah, but once we got that up and running for the team that we worked a little bit more closely with, they were like, oh, okay, wait, you're not going to be assigning, duplicate tasks. I don't have to be, looking at all of my tasks and sorting by, okay, is this phone number, have I repeated? They could use it with a little bit more confidence. So that was definitely a win in a personal way. Seeing the team get excited about it is always exciting as someone who trains a lot of different teams.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's something that comes up a lot when sales is involved or when you're calling a lot. That's a big frustration. Like, I'm calling the same person as my colleague just did, and it's a very poor customer experience for that client or for that prospect. So that's why I figured in this case it might be relevant as well. Yeah. Then what are the main lessons learned in the project, Chris? If you look back now, very complex use case, what will you take away to other projects?
I would have brought Koalify in sooner. The number of contacts getting to 700,000 was a lot, and we had to be a lot more careful with how we rolled out Koalify. I think if we had brought it in a little bit sooner, that would have been really helpful. The other piece is the merge rules. I would have spent a lot more time as we were kind of connecting these marketing sources. In hindsight, I would have better documented immediately where each of these sources was pushing marketing information so that we could have used those merge rules earlier on. That was sort of like a second phase after we were like, hey, we're merging, and we almost use the primary contact as a way to say, hey, we're going to put a ton of rules in the primary contact to make sure that they are the one that we want. I wish I would have used more merge rules to be able to say, hey, it's not less important, but we don't have to spend as much time figuring out and finagling who the primary contact is. And we can just say, these are the fields that are important to us. And if we're able to find, hey, the primary contact comes from this source, great. But make sure that all these merged fields are in. That's the piece for me, is using those merge rules early and often. They are much easier to set up and think about than I initially thought. And unbelievably powerful. So that was the other piece. Use it earlier, but also use merge rules a lot more, lean on them a lot more. Instead of trying to make the primary duplicate do everything, right? And to find the correct contact. Yeah, the merge rules are excellent. So that would be the lesson learned for me. If I could go back, I would definitely be using those more often and more consistently in the process.
Yeah, that's a great learning. Yeah, and you phrase it perfectly. Like, generally, we start with a primary rule to set which record should be the primary, mainly for the email address and the names. But if you actually care about certain properties and you want to retain them in a specific way, don't overthink your primary rules and zoom in on the merge rules and set for each property that you care about a merge rule to decide how you want to merge them. Cool, great learning. Is there anything that you would like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, when approaching a client that has a lot of complex plugins for leads, my initial hesitation and fear was always kind of the data chaos. For me, at least, having Koalify and feeling confident using the tool now that I've implemented it a few times, for me, I am much less hesitant when a client says, hey, here are all of our data sources. And I'm like, are those really all of your data sources? And they're like, well, there's actually 2 or 3 more. This tool has given me a lot more confidence to be able to handle and manage those kinds of clients and to be able to pitch to them data cleanliness and consistent marketing attribution down the line. That's just something that I feel like I can actually deliver now that I'm comfortable using Koalify and we have these tools. And so for me, when you are approaching a project for other partners or HubSpot admins, when you're approaching a project, and thinking about like all of the different ways that data is being imprinted into HubSpot, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can normalize it. But Koalify is kind of a tool that you can't live without, that you absolutely need to be able to yeah, successfully get there. For me at least, I just haven't been able to find anything else that works in the way that it does for this kind of data normalization, and especially at scale when you are strapped for time and you don't have time to sit down and manually go through all of these contacts. So I would just say if your end goal is data uniformity, awesome. Qualify is great. If your end goal is consistent marketing attribution, you will probably need a tool like this unless you have very clear and clean cut data coming in, which in my experience just isn't that normal, right? Nobody's getting data imprinted into HubSpot in the way that you want. It's coming in the way that it wants. And so find something that's going to kind of solve it. So that's going to get you to where you need to go.
Yeah, that's awesome quotes. I will definitely use that. I have one more question. You also mentioned time indeed. So instead of doing it manually, you used or you leveraged technology like Koalify. Could you give a quick estimation of how long it took to set up like initially and then do an extra round of optimizations? Because you clearly did it in like at least 2 steps.
Yeah, for sure. Geez, I would honestly say in total, setting up and getting things ready was about 2 hours. That was if I'm looking strictly at like, hey, I'm setting up and testing my primary rules. I'm setting up and testing my merge rules or the initial merge rules. It really wasn't long at all. From there, I would look at the numbers, the lists that that are provided. After you set up a primary rule or you set up a duplicate rule, you can kind of see, hey, how many meet this duplicate rule? And once I saw that number, looked at the list and was like, yeah, this feels like close, this feels similar. Maybe 2 hours of work. It does take a little bit longer when you have a large contact base to look at. So maybe 2 hours to set up, 2 hours of work to really sit down and think about it. And then, yeah, probably I'd say another couple hours throughout, asking the client, talking about which field is important, which one do we need to have on the merge rules, really was not long at all. The work itself was understanding the data.
Yeah.
Qualify was the easy part. So yeah, it's a really simple setup. And if you watch some of the walkthrough videos, some of the tutorials, it gets very easy. It is a very powerful tool, so you want to be careful, right? You don't want to use this tool recklessly. It's a sharp knife. It's not something you want to just turn on and not think about. You want to be very intentional with it.
Yeah, sounds great. And indeed, it's a powerful tool. And with great power comes great responsibility. So
Yes.
watch out. Cool. Thanks for joining us, Chris. It was a great episode again. I really appreciate your support and your help and explaining this great case study.
Thank you so much.